Meeting to order of the City of Monona Plan Commission, Monday, July 8th, 2019. Would you be kind enough to call the roll?
Absolutely. Commissioner Fox?
Here.
Commissioner Moore?
Here?
Commissioner Holmquist?
Here.
Commissioner Stein?
Here.
Colleen, I don't know your last name, how to pronounce?
Corinne Fallett.
Fallett. Commissioner Fallett?
Here.
And Commissioner Humberg?
Here.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the minutes from June 24th, 2019?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, great. Do I have any changes, additions, corrections to the minutes from the 24th? Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great. Minutes are passed. There are no appearances. We have no unfinished businesses. Unfinished business, I should say. And then we'll move to new business. Number 6A, public hearing for rezoning request and map amendment from single-family residence district, Monona Municipal Code of Ordinances, Section 480-24, to two-family residence district, Monona Municipal Code of Ordinances, Section 480-25, at 309 Femright Drive, as requested by Raywood Development LLC, case number 2004-2019. Mr. Ganser, would you like to head up to the podium and present? Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Dale Ganser with Raywood Development. So you've all had the opportunity to take a look at the packet I sent in to Doug. And I'm just going to review a couple of those things. I mean, I don't have any material or drawings in addition to what's in that packet. So there were just a couple of specifics that I wanted to cover. Obviously, I'm looking to rezone 309 Femright Drive from a single family to a two-family lot. And I started my process, and this was the purpose for the map in your packet from the City of Monona Comprehensive Plan that was done in 2016. I just simply looked for examples and precedent in the City of Monona for two-family lots and single-family lots adjacent to each other. Quite honestly, though I know from Monona quite well, it wasn't until I looked at this there were actually more of them than I realized. Ford Street, over by Ford Street between Owen and Frost Woods, between Teresa and Valerie, and then in my neighborhood on Rose Lawn. There are 6 two-family homes. So I felt the precedent was set for my request. After that, I went to look at also in the comprehensive plans, Monona's housing strategies that were laid out in 2016. As you probably know, some of you were involved in that. The small lot subdivision I did at the corner of Femright and Rose Lawn is cited, and there is example of one new housing type Monona would like to encourage. We introduced the small lot subdivision to Monona in 2012. That property, I think, and I think I noted this in my letter, though there was resistance initially, both from the neighborhood and some from the city. It came out pretty successful, and honestly, without exception, there's nobody that I have spoken to about that project that wasn't real happy with the results of that. So I'm kind of proud of that, though this is, and I've looked to do more of those, but that's have not been successful, and that's a conversation for a later date as to why I haven't been able to get more of those going in Monona. Anyways, I looked to the goals and objectives in the comprehensive plan, and was just trying to single out some that I thought were relevant to my request tonight. And encourage the balanced development of a variety of housing types. Research and support creative housing proposals that bring new and diverse housing types to Monona. Promote affordable homes to first-time home buyers, families, and young professionals. And then promote owner-occupied multifamily structures. Consider new policies and programs to promote owner-occupied units within multifamily structures. This is hard for me because I pace when I'm on the phone, and when I'm talking, that's how I get my steps in. This is really hard for me to stand still. So we need a clip on one of these in the future. Another motion. That last one is kind of where I'm heading with this, is I kind of was trying to put together what I'm trying to accomplish with this. I mentioned in the letter as well, there's a lot of, and you may have noticed I'm not using the word duplex. I'm not using that for a reason, because there's a stereotype that goes along with the idea of a duplex. And I think in Monona we have a lot of old style two-family homes, symmetrical, two-car garages, built in the 50s and 60s, and I'm looking for so much to accomplish something so different than that, and this promote owner-occupied multifamily structures is part of kind of what I'll refer to as my business model. I'm trying to create a two-family home. There'll be a little more size, and this is not aesthetics, I'll get to that, but this is strictly the functional aspect, the business aspect of it. Looking to create the two-family home, one side probably a little bit larger than the other, and what I'm looking for is that these units would be sold to those, the young professionals you mentioned in your goals here, home buyers, and they would live in one side and have the opportunity to rent out the other side. I always thought that was a great concept. I searched for it when I was starting out. I looked at a lot of two-family homes, and it didn't work out, but I've always thought that was a great way to start out home ownership. So that's kind of an important aspect to it. These are very much, this is going to very much be designed as permanent home. These are not the two-family homes you're familiar with in Monona at all. The rest of it, I think, is better spoken to aesthetically.
Could we get the document reader, please?
You all have a picture. And I want to emphasize, this is not final design. The design is in process. This was some direction I came up with for the architect. This in the site plan. So this is just my general idea. It is very much the direction. So two-family home, first and foremost, at all costs, I avoid symmetry. I think that's the first look of a duplex is that, let's come up with a design and flip it over here, and we've got two homes and we build it. So absolutely no symmetry in anything that I would do. The one thing that I'm taking a rather significant risk on that concerns me a little bit, but I just aesthetically I can't help myself, is those are two 1.5 car garages. So, I'm looking to sell a unit or lease units with 1 car garages, which I know firsthand is very problematic. I mean, we have a ton of them in Monona. Madison's got a ton of them. But in a new structure, that's kind of risky, but, and my intent in doing more of these would try to create a rear-loaded situation like I did at Femrite. That's ultimately what I would like to do, but I cannot put up a building with two-car garages on the front of it. I mean, aesthetically, there is simply no way to make that look good, in my opinion. Not in a home in the kind of the market that I'm looking for. So they will have two one-car garages. And black, which I thought was such a great idea because it's so cool, but now as I start to look around in some of the new neighborhoods, I see this is starting to come on, but I think it's a great look, and there's not one in Monona. So it'll look really cool like that. And the site plan, this is Femrite over on this side. And the yellow, thank you. The yellow that you're looking at is the existing home, the existing structure. And then laid over the top of it is, again, my preliminary layout and what I used for direction with the architect, but it is in fact not exact. But it just kind of gives you a little emphasis, it gives you an idea of the symmetry. We have our double wall right here between the two units. And so one unit, the smaller unit, what I might consider the rental unit, is more parallel with the property line, and then the second unit, or the owner-occupied unit, is runs a little more parallel with Femrite. Two single-car garages, but they're three-bedroom, three-bath homes. Very nice, very much the flavor. Let's leave it. This is fine. Very much the flavor of the homes we did on Femrite, in that just kind of architecturally in that vein, and the interiors would be very much like that. Maybe not quite as high-end as those were, but still very nice. So again, I put the emphasis on the look and what we're trying to do with two-family lots. This is a very extreme example, and I don't know if any of you are aware of this. Actually, Brian probably is, but larger cities, and Minneapolis was I think they were the first, is eliminating their single-family zoning throughout the city, which makes all lots available for 2- and 3-family homes. I think that's an extreme example, but I think if done right, 2- and 3-family homes can very, very easily integrate into single-family homes and add to the neighborhood, as opposed to, in my opinion, a lot of them detract from a neighborhood. It's a matter of design. It's always a matter of design, I think. So. And then the rest of the stuff in your packet was just some information. I mean, of course, the stuff about the Femrite homes, and then two-family homes we did in Austin, Texas, which were both in single-family. I mean, it's just marketing material, but both in single-family neighborhoods. Both of them getting awarded 5-star green, which, those of you familiar with LEED, that whole program was built off of Austin's initial green program in the city. They were the first ones, and the national one kind of grew out of that. Both of those homes got 5-star green rating, the highest ratings with 7s. We got 7s on those homes, with 5 being the highest. It's a point system, well, that's where we ended up. Anyways, that's it, except for questions or thoughts or direction.
Thank you, Bill. Is there anyone else here that is here to speak about this? Please head up to the podium if you would. And introduce yourself when you get it.
Hi, my name is Jeff Femright, and I'm an attorney here for Dick and Jeannie Femright. Dick is my brother and lives next door. Obviously, their concern is their concern comes from the fact that they're the next door neighbors of this property, and kind of the general concern that they have is, you know, with the development that was done across Roselawn, corner of Roselawn and Femright, you know, obviously a multi-family project on what had been a single-family site. And now this on the other side of them, you know, this really leaves them as the last single-family lot on that area. And kind of the density and the scale of the properties that are going in, you know, causes them some concern. And so they asked me to come here and raise an objection. So, and again, the project across the street was well done, and nothing personal with respect to the developer or the development, just really a concern about being left as the sole postage stamp single-family lot in an area that seems to be becoming denser. So that's their objection.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure. Actually, we have a
question's for
question here.
clarifying.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Public hearing. That's all right. Before we close the public hearing, Brian has a question.
I'm wondering if you can give any more clarity around the specific concern regarding the density or the scale?
Well, you know, can we go back to the drawing? Or the
plat?
The footprint? The footprint? So obviously you've got a single family, so again, it's a combination of kind of a broader concern. You know, you across the street, we took down a single family property, replaced it with 6 different units. Here, we're taking a relatively small footprint and doubling the size of it. So, and, you know, you've got a 17 feet to the property line, and then their property is fairly close to that property line as well. So their concern comes with, you know, adding the size of this property adjacent to theirs.
Just that the house next door to them, though, is single family, right? I mean, those houses on down the street are single family.
On Roselawn?
On Roselawn?
Correct.
Correct, yeah.
Yes.
So when you say they're the last.
The last one on
Right
Femright.
next to them, but right on Femright.
Right.
Yeah, got it, right.
You know,
And there's no request here related to the size of the house as it relates to the lot lines, which is to say, if somebody came and wanted to tear down the current structure and build a new house that was this size or even larger, a single-family home, that would be perfectly okay, correct? So in terms of the overall size of the house, I mean, there's nothing within the size of the house and the size of the lot that is otherwise rubbing against our current zoning regulations for setbacks, side or front or back.
are you asking me that?
Yes.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
I have a question too. It's actually.
Yeah.
Can I respond?
No.
When we go to our discussion.
the discussion,
Oh, okay.
you can
All right.
respond, yeah.
Yeah,
She can ask
I
Yes,
have a
absolutely.
question about that, the 17-foot, 17 and a half foot setback. That's the same as what's currently there, right? Is that changing
No, what's
at all?
currently there is 14.
So it's
What I-
more space.
And again, it's very important, I put
It's
emphasis on, this
preliminary.
is not the final drawings,
Okay,
but the side setbacks are 10 feet. The current home is 14 feet from the Femrite property.
And this preliminary one is giving
And this
it,
preliminary one is 17, but again,
Preliminary,
I'm not
okay.
trying to mislead anybody with this, I simply don't have the drawings complete.
Any other questions before we close the public hearing? Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Appreciate it. Having no one else here, just, go ahead, sir.
I live right, pretty much on the back side of the house.
And
Kind of
your
what Dick
name
and
is?
Jeannie are talking about, you know, he did a good job with that development, but I really don't have much ground to stand on, but I would just prefer that we stay a residential neighborhood. I see houses going up all over in Monona, and there's no duplexes going up. All they are is better houses for their families to live in. So I would prefer that it just stay a single resident thing. When you look down the end of the street where all them duplexes are, they look like shit. So I would just as soon keep it a residential area. If you don't want the property, sell it and let somebody else do something with it. That's about all I have.
Could you give us your name, sir?
Brian
And
Person,
your address?
6104 Roselawn Avenue.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
You're immediately to the south?
Correct.
Thank you.
Right next to Dick and Jeannie.
Thank you. Okay. Seeing no one else here, we're going to close the public hearing and move to 6B, consideration of action for approval and recommendation to the City Council for approval of a rezoning request and map amendment from single-family residence district, Monona Municipal Code of Ordinances, Section 48024, to two-family residence district, Monona Municipal Code of Ordinances, Section 48025, at 309 Femrite Drive, as requested by Raywood Development LLC, case number 2004-2019. City Administrator, would you like to share?
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add to this. City Planner Plowman outlined in his cover memo kind of his analysis of the application. Kind of the recommendation from staff is recommend approval based upon the statements in the comprehensive plan for small lot subdivisions. With that, we'll take any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Now we'll open up this consideration of action for questions. So, Dale, I'm guessing that some of those questions are going to be directed at you, so why don't you step back up to the podium, if you will. Thank you. Chris, would you like to start?
No, but I will. First, earlier you wanted to answer a question, but as you know from being here before, we don't
I
entertain
can't remember from one
debates
day to the
between the
next.
general public and the applicant because it gets a little out of control. So what we do is we go back and ask you that same question, and you were
Right.
going to respond to Mr. Femrite's comments.
Yeah. I'm not even sure if this is appropriate, but I will note for the commission that I went over to talk to Dick and Jeannie 3 times over the past 3 weeks and talked to their daughter Michelle at length every time, and made sure they had the material. They spend their time up north at their cottage during the summer, and I asked Michelle to pass on, my contact information. Obviously, they know me, and call me with any questions or concerns they have. All right, so it's important to note that I did that.
And he
Second.
absolutely did.
Secondly, legal identification is important. I did not build a multifamily project on the corner of Femrite and Roselawn. Those are 6 fee simple, single-family homes. Okay, that's important. Regarding size, and it was mentioned by the commission, somebody could, first of all, I just rejected a 3,600 square foot layout, which would have been 2 1,800 square foot units. So we will below that. I'm trying to target somewhere between 3,000 and 3,200. I live in one of those 6 homes that I built a couple years ago. I have 2,700 square feet of finished space in those homes. So I'm talking about 2 units with somewhere between 3,000 total and 3,200. All right. I brought up and put little, I will put some emphasis on the duplexes around town. That stereotype is exactly what I'm trying to change. 2-family homes truly are a major part of the future of housing. And this will be like the homes on Femrite. This will be Monona's model as to what a 2-family home can be. And then, anything else?
The big trees, I assume you have it set back so far, so that one massive oak you're trying to save, knowing you.
I am trying to save it. I really want to save it so much so that, you know, we're going to even try to work with a swerve in the driveway. So at this point, there's only one tree, which you can see on the regular, not the site plan, but the survey in there. There's one tree that would come down. That tree is about 50% visibly dead already. The oak tree certainly is not dead. I think we all know what utilities do to oak trees that encroach on electrical wires. So it's seriously butchered. But I so much want to keep it because from the front, I mean, are you kidding? That's an incredible look. Though it have to be, it will be trimmed pretty dramatically.
So, my thoughts.
Yes.
Number one, I'd like to hear what everybody else thinks about this. This is one of the problems we have with spot zoning. When we try to do spot zoning, you're putting it next to single-family homes, and neither homeowner wants it next to them. And it's a problem. When we talk about going throughout the city, we'd have the entire city here if we started dropping these in all the single-family neighborhoods. So if you're going to do it, it's a good location because it's on Femrite, it's across from multifamily, but that doesn't take away the fact that there's a single-family resident next to it on 2 of the 4 sides that object to it. So I'm very anxious to see what everybody else thinks. I want to be clear, our action tonight is to change zoning. And once we change zoning, it's out of our hands. So we can talk about the home and what it's going to look like and how it'll be built, how beautiful it'll be, how it'll be taken care of. That's going to be owner occupied, but we can't assure any of that. If we approve a zoning change, it is whatever anybody wants to make it. And we have no control over that, where we do with multifamily and commercial, where we can put conditions on how it gets built and what happens. So our only action tonight would be whether or not we decide to change zoning, or whether or not we recommend the council change zoning on that parcel.
Right.
So, like I said, I'm very anxious to hear what everybody else thinks about this. Thanks.
Corinne, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions at the moment, but
What are you thinking?
I think if we want to try to be true to the goals and objectives we set forward in the comprehensive plan, we have to give this serious consideration. Because we have, if you look at our map, we have a lot of single-family residential, and unless we do make recommendations for changing that zoning to something else, we will never be able to achieve the goals and objectives as stated in our comprehensive plan to try to increase multifamily. Whether this is the place that we do it, I think that's what we're going to discuss. But it is going to, this is a creative housing proposal. It's going to bring a new and diverse housing type to Monona. And I'm not sure it'll attract new residents, and it depends on the price point as to whether it's going to be affordable and something for new first-time home buyers or not. But we say we want to promote owner-occupied multifamily structures. So, and it does seem if you look at the rest of the properties, I mean, I am sensitive to the fact that there's single-family homes right next door, But this is really adding one additional family, so it's not like we would be putting an apartment building there, so.
Mhm.
Question, can you talk about your concept for this as a rental, or basically an income property? Are you talking about having someone buy
Yeah, long-term.
the whole building and then rent it?
Correct, exactly. And
What's the
that's-
concept behind that?
What is the concept?
Yeah,
behind
like
that?
why that versus a single family, like two single families operating independently?
Well, I'm trying to follow this. Oh, like, why don't I tear it down and build a single-family house and sell
No,
it?
why is it an income property versus just two standalone properties?
Well,
Because now it
no,
comes across as kind of like it's going to be a rental property, and people get nervous about that, and not that we shouldn't have rental properties.
Well, again, if you look at the note in the comprehensive plan, where they talk about one of the options that the city of Monona should pursue is identified as, how is it said here, excuse me? Owner occupied, I forget how it's stated, so let me be precise. Consider new policies and programs to promote owner-occupied units within multifamily structures. Okay, so this is a multifamily structure with an owner-occupied unit in it. All right. So, and like I said, I kind of referenced my past as a kid that I thought, I just couldn't come up with a better, I mean, I was forced into a different situation, but what a great situation to have an opportunity to purchase a building, live in one side and lease out the other side. I think it's a great way for people to start out. So was my only reference there.
Okay.
I can tell by the look on your face that I'm not answering your
Well,
question.
it seems like, I think of first-time homeowners.
Well, no, I didn't say first time, and
Well, you said people to start out what?
Yeah.
I don't, when you said that, I thought it implied first-time homeowners.
It could be. Remember, I'm coming off those 6 homes that I built on Femrite.
Mm-hmm.
I had 3 first-time home buyers in there. And so I realized that they're professionals, they are in a particular demographic. I am not in, I mean, I can't, matter of fact, I don't know if, I know Mr. Homburg was here and Brian was here, but my goal with those was to create a fairly affordable home as well. If any of you have recently built, that's a challenge. That's a real challenge. I was not able to hit my target on those homes within $100,000. So I'm not standing here and saying that this is affordable homes for, a first-time home buyer, depending on their demographic. So I don't want to be misleading anybody. This will be a fairly expensive property. I just happen to know some people that were first-time home buyers that would have been able to do something like this because they live in the project that I did.
Okay.
Rob, to follow up on your question, because I think this might help as well, there's actually, and it might even be referenced in the comprehensive plan, but there's a thing called an accessory dwelling unit, an ADU, that's actually, to Dale's point about this type of housing becoming more and more frequent. Something that is now occurring quite a bit in Madison and has been requested before in Monona as well. And I bring that up because the accessory dwelling unit can be separate on the same lot, or it can be attached. But the idea behind ADUs and the reason why they're becoming more popular is not because somebody is buying a house and renting it to just anybody, the house next door. It's because whoever buys the house needs their parents. Or it's an option for their parents to move in so they can take care of their parents, or they have a child, or or I should say a young adult or something that is not, for one reason or another, can't be on their own, or frankly can't afford to be on their own given. So that's another, when you think about the model of the buy rent thing, just know that that's one other possibility certainly for somebody, because there's just a high need for people taking care of their parents or taking care of their kids, increasingly in the United States, because of the economy.
I can tell you what I like about it. It does achieve a lot of the objectives stated in the comprehensive plan. As far as location goes, it's going to be a sensitive subject with wherever you put this. I think it's reasonably placed where it's at. One really great thing is what you've done before. You have work that you've done in town that I think it turned out really, really well, what you did at the corner.
Thank you.
It gives me confidence in what you would do there, but it's a sensitive subject with where does it belong. So I'll probably have more comments, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Dale, the items with the 6 subdivision,
I'm sorry?
the 6 homes on Fenway, those are still continue to be zoned as single family.
Those are 6 single-family lots. Yes.
On 1 acre.
On
And
1 acre, that's correct.
the size of this lot, just by square footage,
Is a 1/4 acre.
and so if these units weren't actually attached,
Actually, the density would almost be dead on because the homes on Femrite are on 0.8 acres. I rounded to an acre, but they're 0.8. So that'd be about, 2.7 or 0.27 acres per 2 units. So the density actually would be identical.
yeah. I mention that because I think this connects the policy issue and the kind of spot dropping issue, a concern. Clearly, I was here when we were reviewing the comprehensive plan, and many of these goals, were near and dear to some of the conversations I was having in the community and that we had here around our housing mix. To look at, some of our outdated housing mix, be it single family, be it duplex, be it multifamily. We've talked multiple times about units on Roselawn and Femrite that have missed the sweet spot of an opportunity to be redeveloped into something better than they are. Unfortunately, they continue to be bought up by individuals outside our community that are turnover rentals that are not interested in investment. What I think can be different, and some of it comes down to a policy issue of how is it that you create policies that allow some play by the city to help shape that. And I know we've talked about that regarding how, when those housing mixes are coming up for potential purpose and investment, how we take advantage of that from a city side, as well as how we work with developers quickly to meet some of these objectives. I point that out, and I point out the size of this lot, and if we separate these into 2 separate units, we're fitting the same unit of the auxiliary developing unit. Like this could exist without ever coming to us and splitting those 2 up. I think what's unique here is the idea to demonstrate a 2-family home on the same footprint and try to do the best to respect exposure on different sides. So one of the questions I had about the description of the concern around the scale and density, some of the density I wanted to make sure that I was thinking correctly with the 6 homes on Femright. And then some of the other homes that we have on our parcels throughout the city, the density is much higher than this. If you look, scale, I mean, if we look at the exposure to your sister, I believe you said? Brother, sorry. The exposure on that side of the facade is roughly the same, if not less. And the exposure from the backside is roughly the same, if not less. So I think, although we're not here to explicitly talk about the design and how that fits, to Chris's point around, the big question we have is, do we change zoning from one to the other, knowing it could be anything? And I think that is some of the concern when it comes to that bigger policy piece of, are there ways to tie together specific development request paired with that zoning change? And I think that's a question for council and Attorney Cole to figure out of, are there ways to shape that to help us know that, if we're selling, your brother's property and they want to change it, that we have the same expectations, that we're not wanting the duplexes of the 50s and 60s, although some of those can be nice, but the symmetrical just pop-up stuff. So I agree with it in principle, based on our goals, based on, if you separate these buildings, you wouldn't even be here. I think there's a great sensitivity given to the community overall, but our recommendation overall is just on the zoning aspect, and I would recommend it with the aspect of recommendation around Attorney Cole potentially connecting the two, and I don't know if that's even feasible.
That wouldn't be feasible for this, sorry to interject, but that would not be feasible for this application the way that our code is written presently today. I mean, if you want to do something like you suggest where a project in a rezoning were tied together, it would have to be a new zoning category that was created similar to a planned unit development, specifically for a geographic area that was identified in the community. But the way that the zoning code is written today, with the applications before us, we can't necessarily tie one to the other.
Excuse me? Brian, if it was, according to what you're saying then, if it was changed from single family to PUD, then that could be tied in.
Sure, but that's not the application that's before us.
Understood. But if it were to go to PUD zoning, then you have that ability.
Yeah, for any project in town.
Right.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Am I able to I'm sorry, I forget all the rules. Can I respond to Brian?
Yes, you may.
2 comments. One is, and I'm only basing this on the plan from the comprehensive plan document that we're using tonight. This is the largest lot in the neighborhood. And when I refer to the neighborhood, I mean Femright and all the way down Roselawn. This is the largest lot of any of those properties. And the second thing, and I apologize if this is out of turn, but I always, as you know, have the city's best interest in mind, so I'm kind of reverting back to sitting on the Plan Commission when I used to complain about the commission's inability to direct design. That was a very large frustration for me, because it is a very difficult thing to direct and certainly to legislate and all of that kind of thing. But so I looked for communities. I looked for Monona, because of what Brian's talking about is a huge challenge. Someone comes in, you rezone this, and I go build a symmetrical, and they are still being built today. One opens up every day. Symmetrical, 1-story, 2 2-car garages. Every day they're going up in Dane County. So you need to look at a body of work and the city's experience with the applicant to determine how that might come out. And I suspect that's probably something you can't do, but certainly was a frustration of mine when I was on Plan Commission, because that's important. That's important.
Thank you.
Well, when I read this goal 2.3 and with the objective about promoting owner-occupied multifamily structures, I was picturing more of a condo situation. So I was picturing this as a two-family building that two separate families would own each their side. I mean, that's kind of what I came in thinking. And I'm just wondering if you'd be open to that too? Is that, or is that going against?
I would absolutely be open to that. I have already had the conversation as to making these condominiums. The examples I showed you down in Austin, Texas, both of those properties were condominiums.
Okay.
2-unit condominiums, homeowners association, two units in that homeowners association, everything. I've had a conversation with my attorney about that, and he said that's no problem. You can do it before, you can do it later. And so I'm absolutely open to that, but it's something I can do at any point, so I wasn't put in a situation to make a decision right now. I'll just express this as to why I'm not making that decision up front. My daughter has lived in the Netherlands for 9 years and recently got married over there to a Dutch person, so I got to deal with that. They're actually moving back next summer, and they will be occupying one side of this. So I know that for a couple of years, so I don't need to address the condominium thing. But absolutely, I would consider that. That's very much a part of, in the realm of possibilities.
Yeah, I think it's nicely done. I mean, when I drove by, I was looking at the lot line too, and I'm glad to see at least that this plan doesn't come any closer, because there isn't a lot of, but just step, according to ordinance, even the setback is not huge between those lots, and there's no shrubbery or anything to sort of separate, which I would think would be nice. But I like the looks of this, and it seems to me it would have relatively minimal impact in terms of additional people in the area, in terms of density. But I'm a little torn too with the whole slippery slope idea. I mean, I'm a little concerned about adding another rental property, but under these circumstances, that might not be as big a concern. But I'd be concerned if that started to go down, if we did approve this zoning and then there were requests, if somebody bought up. I mean, maybe the one lot on Femray or on Roselawn would be small for a multifamily, but somebody might come along and try to buy two and then want to do that, and then that starts to change the tenor of the neighborhood. And of course, that would have to come to us, I guess, so we'd have some control over that, but so I'm not sure where I am on this right at the moment.
Great. Do I have any other questions? Yes.
Well, just for discussion, when we wrote the comprehensive plan that we're dealing with right now, it was adopted in 16. We probably wrote it in 14 and 15, went through it. I think it took us at least 2 years to write it all. Since we started writing it, we've gained hundreds, literally, of rental units in the city. And when we started writing it, we still had more owner-occupied residences than rental, and we don't anymore. And that's very, very unusual for a community our size. So I'm not bringing it towards this, but when we go to the objectives in the plan, we have to look at what we have and what we're doing, because we have a lot of rental in Monona, a lot more than, we looked at the charts a few years ago, a lot more than any community our size. So the goals and objectives, when they're written, it was to promote owner-occupied multifamily. That was a key. We don't know how to do it, but that's what we really want to do. We want to see some of that ownership in the community. And I don't know how, I like the proposal, but I don't know how to guarantee we're going to have owner-occupied. That's the thing I'm struggling with, I know Rob kind of touched on it, did you consider like a zero lot line? To come in and ask for a zero lot line or a building?
It took me 6 months to get the homes ephemerate through.
Well, but a
I
zero lot
wasn't even
line,
going to consider.
I'm not talking about PUD. PUD is what I mentioned where you do
Right.
have the control, and that was a PUD. A zero lot line would be that you basically build the building, you have to get approval for it, and you have ownership. Each lot has ownership
Sure,
on the
that-
building.
that would be the condominium thing. Actually.
Well, that's different than
Go ahead. It is, right.
Yeah, if you like a condominium, it's different, because you actually physically own it, and you don't have responsibilities for the other half. Each person runs it like it's their own home, it's just an attached, single family.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right, and it is different than condominiums. There are attached fee simple homes.
Yes.
All over America.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. To your concern, that doesn't change any of the problems you're discussing, because someone can own both of them and rent them.
Absolutely. They
Yeah,
can buy any home in Monona and rent it out. But
Correct.
it makes it more likely that it'll stay.
Sure.
In my opinion, it makes it more likely that it'll stay owner occupied
Mhm.
when you give the opportunity like that. And somebody can buy them both and let their mother-in-law live in it or whatever. I mean, over 40 years ago, first thing I built was a duplex, and I lived in half and I rented out the other half.
Yeah, there you
I
go.
mean, I
wasn't smart enough to accomplish that.
You're probably way ahead of me. So I understand the concept, I like the concept. I'm struggling mightily with spot zoning, I'm struggling mightily with only 2 adjacent neighbors, both object to it. And I like the concept, but I'm struggling with those things. I'm struggling with how do we try to, because we can go into the comprehensive plan, and I can show you where it says we should promote preserving single family, promote redevelopment of single family, which is opposite of this. I mean, you can use parts of that comprehensive plan to support almost any position you want. So, to come in here and hit one section and not the other, I mean, that's. Yeah.
Well, the only
We could
section I
redline
can
it.
address is housing. What do you
Correct.
mean, one section and not?
Of housing, because
Yeah.
part of our housing goal is to promote the rebuilding and the preservation of single family. So I mean, you can pick a section and prove your point from either side. So I would like to be able to do this, but somehow have a high probability that it is hit our goal. Of the one thing we don't have is owner-occupied multifamily. We have some condominiums up on Monona Drive, but that was the intent when we wrote the master plans, to try to encourage more ownership in our community.
We can't really do that with this proposal. We don't have the authority to do that. I mean,
Not if we zone it into a duplex lot, sorry, a 2-unit lot, but I think our code calls it, I don't know what our code calls it. Two-family lot, then it can be whatever it wants to be. But it hits our two-family zoning ordinance, which if he builds it, I believe it'll be built well, but there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee when it turns over. There's no guarantee of who will occupy it. So that's where I'm struggling. I like the proposal.
But that could happen anywhere
Yeah.
in the community.
Yeah.
Somebody could sell the house next to me
Mhm.
and then rent it.
right,
And that happens as well. There's
Absolutely.
rental houses.
Absolutely.
I
right.
mean, we never have control over
It's
it.
just so much more likely with multifamily. Yeah, but I agree, it could happen to any home next to any of us.
Right.
It's interesting now, I'm starting to quote the history when we were doing the comprehensive plan, back to Chris's comment about the mix of owner occupied and renter. And one of the key pieces when we were reviewing that data, one had to do with the number of units that were available in multi-unit structures, and the increase since that time was really some of our bigger projects, which increased the number of those units. But what struck me, and I think most of us on the council or committee at that time, had to do with the number of single-family homes being owned by non-Monona individuals being rented.
Mhm.
So people finding things sight unseen, purchasing and renting.
Yep.
And our concern was really addressing that piece, and I think to Dale's point, when he then joined us on the planning commission, had to do with how is it that you invest in our single-family home stock to make it much more desirable that people are wanting to invest in that property, and when we are making changes, that it's designed in a way that is promoting that owner occupied versus the, I'm gonna buy it and just rent and repaint and repeat.
May I respond to that?
Yes, sir.
It ties into Brian's comment. My whole point here is, and this isn't a criticism, this is understandable. Everybody's thinking about duplexes. I know the 6 duplexes Brian's talking about, and his colorful language really didn't do them justice. He was being polite. And I can't state this as a fact. I have tried to purchase 3 of those. All 3 of them were purchased over asking price, sight unseen, by out-of-town people. One 3 years ago, one 2 years ago, one last year. All 3 of them untouched. Not so much as wash the windows. They buy them, they cash flow, that's the end of it. That is not what we're talking about. That is not what I do. I have 2 other homes on Femrite Drive. They have been completely redone to the point I have a problem with overspending, making things too nice. So I'm a little challenged marketing them sometimes. And 2 of them, well, all 3 of them, this 309 being one of them, but that has not been redone. The other 2 redone, very nice people living in there. I am not talking about what's happening down the street. And I am targeting what's happening down the street. And I need to show Monona what I'm talking about. Just like the objections I had with a small lot subdivision. It had never been done, there was no language, so we created it, right? So this, whether this commission likes it or not, what I'm proposing is very much a part of the housing future. And I want to be the one to show you how that works, because this is really conceited, but I will be successful with it. So this is going to come before you again and again and again. So make sure that we're making a selection to put up a model example that we can reference going forward. I mean, that's really important. It's really important. This is what we're looking for. Anybody putting up a small lot subdivision in Monona, that project is going to be referenced. This is our Monona model for this type of new housing. And this is our Monona model for this type of new housing. I would also argue that I'm next to multifamily already. Anything else?
Any other questions or comments, discussion? Do we have a motion? Somebody like to make a motion?
I'm not sure how to word this, but I'll float it out there for someone to help craft it possibly. And that is either moving along to council without recommendation for or against, but with the consideration for a PUD or 0 lot line to address the same development conceptually, but it has the potential then to tie some of the zoning aspects to the design piece of it. And I'm not sure if then in the future we come back to look at either how we encourage applicants to come forward with something that might be changing a zoning in a spot way, or to give us other potential tools to do something that meets our objectives. I'm not sure if there's a better way to say it.
I'm not sure that the council could even do it that way. I mean, with the application that's in front of them, you're tasked with making a recommendation for or against or table on this specific request. To have the council then change the nature of the application or ask the applicant to change the nature of the application, we'd have to do some more research on that.
Okay.
I had a follow-up question,
Yeah.
though. So you mentioned common lot line or PUD zoning. If hypothetically this application were changed to a PUD application, how would that resolve the spot zoning concern? Because in that case, you're still changing it from single-family to something that's not single-family in that area,
Is that directed at me?
just generally speaking.
Well, I'm the one that said spot zoning. So, let's go back to spot zoning. Spot zoning, I am not a fan of. If you came in with this proposal, it was in the middle of a single-family residential area, I would be totally against it. Right now, it is across the road from multifamily. It is next to a cemetery, but there are still residences on the two sides, so what it exemplifies is how when you try to inject a different zoning type, the issues we all know come up from spot zoning. That's why we try to avoid it whenever we can. So this would not solve that problem. Like I said, if it were in the middle of a single-family residential, I'd say it's not appropriate. I think the people that live there have the reasonable expectation of what's next to them, unless there's a reason for changing that zoning, which is what we're talking about tonight. In this case, our one thing we have is Femrite is virtually all multifamily, except for the small lot subdivision, which is a denser unit, and the Femrite's home. And the small lot subdivision is on the home farm or farmhouse of the Femrites, I believe, where you grew up. And Dick and Jean would right across in the house we're talking about. So they're if we did this, they'd be the only home left there that would not have some multifamily designation of some sort or small lot subdivision. So I can see the symmetry in that. I can see doing it. I don't like putting it next to both homes. I object to it. The gentleman here objects to it too. But in my mind, if we're trying to hit our goal of encouraging more ways to have owner-occupied multifamily or the density, if there's a zero lot line, it's not as difficult as a PUD. It's a lot simpler, but basically.
You start with the replat.
No, CSM. I think you do it by CSM. Brian, am I right?
In most communities, yeah.
You can create up to 4 lots by CSM. So it's much simpler than a PUD. But by doing that, then it's easier to see it stay as owner-occupied. For all Dale's best intentions, we don't know what'll happen 20 years from now. We don't want to create the duplexes on the other end of Rose Lawn for the generation ahead of us 20 years from now, do we? And owners change. So all I'm trying to think of, I'm trying to get my head around letting this happen, approving this, which I think would be a good thing, but still protecting us from the inevitable person that comes in and said, well, you set a precedent here. You did it, so you're going to do it for me. You're going to do it for me. What's your grounds to stand on for not doing that for me? And we hit that every time we do something. So I'd like to see good reasons.
That's absolutely true, but we do have a reason if we were to approve recommendation of this.
Mm-hmm.
We have some reasoning behind it. It's not like this is in the middle of
Correct.
A sole single-family residential. It's not.
Maureen?
Well, and I think he is trying to show how it could be done differently. You know, I don't know the housing market, the trends in the housing market, like you suggest, that this is happening in more communities, and that would be something that would be of interest, I think, to find some more information about Minneapolis, if that's really what they did. They got rid of single-family zoning and what's happening. So, I mean, some of that would be interesting to see, because if we do know that Monona is a very popular community, people are trying to move here. A lot of these houses are on bigger lots and people are coming in and knocking them down. And if they maybe want to start doing something like this, we will be seeing more of it. Whether or not we approve this or not, we will be seeing more applications for different kinds of structures. And it might be in the middle of single-family residence. And maybe in 15 years, we're going to want to have more options for people. So if we have something to show that actually can show what it should look like, that might be a good thing.
Can I respond?
Good point. Sure.
I want to respond to Chris's comments. I totally understand where you're going with it, and where you're trying to get, and I'm kind of unselling it myself, but there is no difference. There, you get no guarantee with zero lot line versus a two-family home versus a condominium, right? I mean, none of them come with guarantees, right? I mean, I could have leased out all 6 of those homes, you know, and they'd still be fee simple, single family homes, everything everybody wants, and they could all be rental properties. So in this particular case, yeah, I'm asking for it to be less complicated because of the financial challenge that's ahead of me because of the way I do things, than increasing, you know, the cost of that process. You know, and maybe there isn't a significant difference. I mean, there would be some cost difference with the condominium. It wouldn't. I don't think it would be too crazy. And the zero lot line thing, quite honestly, I don't. I mean, I understand what that is. I don't know how that pertains to zoning in Monona because I'm not aware of any of them. Any fee simple homes, attached fee simple homes. I don't know if there's any of those around. And that would speak to the zero lot line thing you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't see much difference in those two in terms of control. I mean, I think and I think if you build this, then it will be there. And if the ownership changes through I mean, that's kind of given, but that will be there. But as far as it's being a model, that might entice other builders to do that, but it might not. I mean, that's, I guess, a less strong selling point to me in the sense that we can't control that. I mean, as Chris said in the beginning, once we make this two-family, we sell other lots that are two-family, we can say, yeah, we'd like it to look like this or serve along that line, but that doesn't mean there's any obligation to do it. And we don't have that kind of control. I mean, that's not within the purview of the Plan Commission when they're residences on lots. But anyway, let's just throw that. But Brian, go ahead. You were going to say something.
Yeah, I had a question. I wanted to make sure that my memory serves me right, and it has to do with our properties on the north end of Monona Drive. I'm trying to remember the last time we switched a single family residence zoning to a non-single family, and I think it was the project at the Buckeye Road.
Yeah.
Where there was
Bursch's project, and he sold it, yeah. But that was actually zoned for it. That zoning was changed years and years ago on Monona Drive to encourage multifamily development along that stretch. That zoning was probably changed
Well, we had
25 to 30 years ago.
We had the one home, but then we had the green home next to it.
But they were in a zoning district that allowed the multifamily. We did not change zoning. We had changed the zoning there, I think it was 25 to 30 years ago, to allow that, to encourage. That's when the condos first started building on Monona Drive, and that whole lakeshore was changed. There was a single-family home there, but it was in the zoning type to allow the multifamily.
So on this residential map right now, are these what's existing parcels but not the zoning?
Right,
This should be zoning.
this is the zoning map.
Yeah, this is, well, it's
That's the zoning.
one
map.
and two family zoning, it's not all zoning.
So he's asking about, this is the zoning map.
Oh, yeah. The yours on the right is
Yes.
everything.
I don't know
Yes,
if you want to show
yes.
it.
What do we call this
Can we
document?
get the
Yes, the
document
document reader.
reader?
the
So
zoning
you're
map.
talking about the zoning map,
Mhm.
Brian, versus the, what's their map? Which
Yeah.
shows homes there, but the zoning was always in place for that.
Okay, can you know,
Zoom in somewhere? I bet I can. What would you like?
It's really hard to see it at this size.
in the red is probably CDD?
There's the dark, that's multifamily.
Well, the red is retail, the dark orange is multifamily.
Oh, you can't, yeah, it's really hard to read. That's the different colors. Sorry. Yes. If you look at the- There's all the ones that are coming in the zone map. So, the multifamily looks pretty similar to the retail business when you're looking at the zoning map.
Yeah, and I think that's
You can
tough
see
because
it.
it doesn't necessarily overlay the TID districts as well.
Not necessarily.
For the north end, some of the reasoning that I'm bringing this up is I'm trying to remember some of the conversations when we've had either single resident properties.
Mhm.
And I guess I was confusing the property map with the zoning map, which then helps give the clarity of like, we already made that switch over.
Oh,
even though
we've
it
done
was
it.
Continued.
We have done it, certainly.
Do you remember other projects where?
Well, no, because with CDD zoning, which is over most of it, we have so much flexibility.
Mhm.
I was going to say Fairway Glen, but that was in CDD,
Yep.
so we didn't have to change zoning for that.
Because that had two family residents built behind it.
Yes, but that was in a district, I'm sorry, I'm going to grab it right back from you. That was a district that, were those are single families that were built there, right? Two units.
I thought there were 2 units.
I thought there were two.
Clearly, you know how to operate the document reader better than anyone.
He's the vet, I only watched him just do what I was doing. That's why I just did it, but I'd like to make a comment if I could.
Yes, you may.
Kind of speaks to
I
this.
could go to that end.
You're concerned about precedence.
Yes.
Yeah.
The yellow represents single-family lots, the orange represents two-family lots.
Right.
That precedent has been set. This needs to be addressed by the commission on a per-project basis,
Right.
with or without the acceptance of this proposal. The precedence is here. It's not like anything is being set.
But if you look at the zoning map, the zoning is appropriate for what's in there, it's just, it hasn't all converted, the zoning is okay in there for the 2 units, just some, if you're looking at what's there, some are twos and some are single family. Up in here, both here and over in here. This is zoom, that's why I don't zoom in that far, I can't see what I'm doing. So again, back to Brian's point, you look at those areas, this is all zoned appropriately for, it looks like spot zoning. That's just because some hit the zoning type and some hit the single-family residential.
So, single-family can build on a two-family lot?
Yes. Well, actually, it's more likely that it was single-family and the zoning was changed to allow the two families, it just hasn't all turned over. That'd be the most likely explanation for what happened there.
That would be because the success they had with the traditional type of two-family home is what it is.
Mhm.
And it's quite possible we changed some of that zoning when we redid the zoning, what was that, 10 years ago? Give or take, I don't know, whenever it was. It's quite likely that in an effort to allow some more spots, we could have changed that zoning in that area. Would have been multiple public hearings and talks with the community on that. But it's not spot zoning. We have areas where we're,
Right.
It was trying to help correct some of
yes,
what was perceived as spot zoning.
yes.
Can you go back to the zoning map on
Thank
the
you.
Femright Roselawn section?
You notice, Nancy, I did that in one motion.
I'm just in awe of Dale being able to zoom in the way he's zooming in.
He's good.
So the property that had the 6 homes done looks like it's, I think that's CDD color, or multifamily.
Oh,
Oh, no, it's that grayish
It's
one.
right here.
What's that?
That's a eraser.
Yeah.
Here's the point.
I had a nice point
I don't know
before.
what that's, what?
It looks
what
like
That is the
CDD.
point.
I believe it's CDD,
Yeah.
because this is matching that uncolored down here, so it'd be CDD zoning designation, which would make some sense, which is certainly why it took longer to get
Make
it
it
approved. It
happen.
had to go through CDD approval process. Yes.
Next to that is a single-family home on a multi-family property. I'm just not steady enough for this anymore.
Zoom out a little bit, you look better. If you look at it on the zoning map, it's actually pink. It just doesn't show through on the document reader that way.
I didn't realize I was coming in here with something so controversial, quite honestly.
So, I'm still looking for a
How can I
motion.
help?
Still looking for a motion.
I think what's more helpful is the map on the zoning, and the reason why is I think it helps answer some of the questions. I might sound like I'm talking backwards, but I'm not. I still think this is a good project to do, and I think there's a way to do it with a different type of application. When I look at what exists and what we've tried to piece together for more cohesive zoning, I don't think identifying this property and switching its zoning to multifamily is the best approach.
Excuse me, that's not the request. It's two-family.
Two-family, I'm sorry. That the project across that is still listed on our, what's there is single-family, was really CDD, which got us, helped get that project through, which probably took additional time. And many of the other elements,
correct.
even the multifamily across the street from that, over on the subway side,
Correct.
was CDD. That's not zoned as multifamily, that's zoned as CDD as well. The cohesion for Roselawn was single family. And when we revisited the zoning, that northern end remained single family. The southern end unfortunately stayed two family, although we talked about the concerns. I would like to see this come back with a different solution to the zoning issue to still make it happen without the spot zoning.
Brian, is that,
I mean, the options that the commission has on the table are to recommend approval, recommend denial, or table the application and
right,
request additional information or questions of the applicant.
Is the applicant interested in looking at other options to make this feasible without changing from a single-family zoning to a two-family zoning?
I understand what you're trying to accomplish. I'm not sure that I can speak freely, and I would argue that it's semantics at best. So I'm asking tonight to recommend approval to the city council or not recommend approval to the city council. And I truly say that respectfully, but that's what I came in here for. I understand what you're trying to accomplish and believe it's semantics under the circumstances.
still looking for a motion?
Can I ask another question?
Yes, you may.
So if I understood what you just said, Dale, correctly, you would rather have us recommend denial and get it up to the city council so they can make a final decision than table it and have it come back?
I believe I can make that decision in the future to come back and discuss an alternative way of accomplishing the same thing. But yes, I'm asking, of course, for your recommendation for approval tonight. You know, and so I'd like to stick with the application the way it is. And based on the outcome, then I'll make a decision as to what I'm going to do with the property.
Just a question, clarification.
Mhm.
If we don't approve a recommendation tonight, then does it even go to the city council? I mean, if it's denied here, does it go there? Or what's?
You have to offer a recommendation one way or the other, or table it. It cannot, a rezoning
Right,
application
right.
cannot go to city council
Right.
unless there's been some sort of report and recommendation from the planning
Right, but it
commission.
can be denied and still go, that was my question,
Mhm.
okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's move us along. I'll
Yeah.
make a recommendation that we deny with the additional information discussed here about supporting the project overall, and to the applicant's point that there are some semantics, and I'm not interested in being bogged down by the semantics, and I understand what will go in minutes and live beyond us in the sense of what people will come back with. And I look at other properties that are in a zoning to help build cohesion, and I want to make sure that we have a way of going back and confirming when we're talking about zoning maps and what people are going to do in the future, that we have some ability to use our comprehensive plan as a tool to make that accomplishment. And I respect the desire to have an answer one way or the other, and know that I hope to see it go forward in some way, form, or fashion.
So your motion on the floor is to deny.
Yep.
Do I have a second?
Can I
Chris?
ask a question of the
Uh-huh.
I suppose I can. But your motion to deny was based on you'd like different, more information and a way to make a more cohesive.
Brian was indicating that we can either deny, approve,
Or table?
or table, and asking the applicant of, would you want to come back and with a different alternative? And Dale indicating that, like, he can make that decision after approval or denial, that I would recommend a denial, given that it doesn't fit within the zoning aspect that we discussed. And if it moved on to council, that the additional discussion items that we had here tonight regarding other possible ways to uphold the comprehensive plan zoning and accomplish what's being proposed, there are possible solutions, rather than the council feeling like they either have to accept or deny a change in zoning on this one parcel.
Can we have more discussion yet, or do we have to wait till?
Someone's got to second it?
If we get a second.
I'll second it so we can discuss
Okay.
it.
All right, so now we have a second, now we can discuss.
I mean, if the end result is the same, is going to be the same, then I mean, if we're looking at this, even if we're looking at the zoning map, rezoning this parcel to two-family it's still not in the middle of,
Residential.
it is in the middle of your two properties, and I understand that, but it is not in the middle of, I don't know, the Frostwoods neighborhood.
If you put that
So-
back up, the whole north end of Roselawn is zoned single family. So the cohesiveness.
Do we have the document reader again, please?
Roselawn, the whole north end, except for one parcel,
Will be if we,
is single family right now.
right.
But Pembroke is not.
But I guess what I'm saying is,
Correct.
if the end result is going to be that there's two some of the concerns that were expressed by the residents that live next door is that there's going to be an increased density, which will happen if he comes back with a different proposal, and scale, which will happen if he comes back with the proposal. So, I mean, I guess I know what you're saying too. We wouldn't have to change our zoning map, but.
May I be part of this?
I think, yes.
You would have to change the zoning map, obviously, because you can't build 2 homes on a single-family lot, and it's zoned single-family, so it's either going to be any number of things, including a 2-family lot. I'll apologize in advance if this isn't relevant, and it's not completely relevant to the conversation, and I'm going to, in a very abstract way, try to make a point. I invested greatly in those 6 single-family homes, and I took a bath. I took a bath because that neighborhood does not support what I was trying to do and what I was trying to accomplish. That neighborhood has been considered the rough side of Monona since before I lived here. And it's a risk I was willing to take because I believe in new urbanism. I believe in improvements. I believe in taking risks. One of the reasons I couldn't sell those homes was because so many people objected to looking at 48, I believe, condominiums across the street. And next to that, across from the street from this project, it's going to be problematic looking at I don't know what it is, I believe about a 32-unit senior facility. So as we're having conversation about whether we rezone single family to double family or to 2-family, my whole challenge is that I'm surrounded by multifamily, and that is a tremendous marketing risk on my part. But I'm just stupid enough to do those types of things to make a point. So I'm hearing about this concern about incorporating this into single family, and my biggest roadblock is all the multifamily. You know, I mean, I have a hard time working through that in my head. And we talk about the single family on Roselawn. I mean, whatever. Outside my front window is a senior facility, very nicely kept up. I have no issue, I love it. And a condominium project that's 3 stories high. And my problem is that it's single family down the street. I mean, I'm really having a hard time connecting this because my whole environment there is multifamily. I mean, that's what I'm marketing, that's what I'm building against. I can't put a single family home there. We're gonna put up a $500,000 home across from a 32-unit senior facility and a 48-unit condominium project. You know, I can't do that. I can't do that. You know, so, I mean, again, I apologize if I'm out of turn, but I mean, I'm really having a hard time working through this in my head because I'm surrounded by multifamily and a cemetery. And that's what I have to work with on that property. And I mean, you can't build a home for under $500,000 nowadays. I can't build a home there and try to sell it for $600,000. I had to break even on all 6 of those things. I'm sorry.
Corey, thank you. Corey, you look like you were.
Well, I was just going to comment. I think this makes sense to me, but I think Brian's comment was more on not against the project itself, but on changing the zoning. So, if I'm
No,
wrong.
I understand that. I understand that.
Too. I don't know
Well,
if he sees.
I guess I am not so concerned, and maybe this is naive, but about precedent. If we would decide to change the zoning here, because of what we've talked about, because of the fact that it is sort of a unique situation. It is on Femright, it's not on Roselawn. It does face other multi-family housing. There is a cemetery next to it. I mean, when you look at it, yeah, I mean, I think it is harder to think of building a new single-family home there in that sense. And so to send it, to make it muddier and send it back to the council because we want them to go a different route to get the same final thing doesn't make much sense. It's going to be the same density as far as the concerns we heard. You're still going to have two families there potentially, no matter how, whether it's through the other process or this one. So I'm not sure I see a point in that. It seems to me it's either okay or not in some ways.
I would say after going back and forth, like, it's a tough decision, and it's one we shouldn't take lightly, and I don't. And I sat quietly while we were waiting for a motion to be made, because I don't want to make a mistake and make the wrong recommendation. That said, by and large, I think it's an appropriate proposal. I think it's a good proposal in general. The location to turn single family into two family, if you're going to look at our zoning map and all over Monona, I think it's a good candidate all in all. Yeah, I would leave it at that, and I don't know if we need to muddy the waters personally, unless I hear something else that changes my mind.
Do we want to take a vote on the motion on the floor? Which is to deny?
What are our options then?
Sorry?
After that's made, then we're done? Or can we make another
No.
motion?
No.
If it doesn't carry,
If
somebody
it
can
doesn't
put
carry,
forth
then
another
somebody can
motion.
put forward
Okay.
another motion, yeah. Okay? So let's take a vote on the motion on the floor, which is to deny the application to change to a two-family, to change the zoning to a two-family.
Madam Chair, just point of
Zoning.
information.
Yes.
It's the motion would be a recommendation to the city council to deny.
Right, correct. Recommendation to the city council for denial. Yes.
And point of clarification, when others have asked what happens if it doesn't pass, if there are considerations that you're wanting people to hear, it's important to speak them before we take a vote. So if there are items that you're wishing us to consider, because we can't have two motions on the floor at a time, because we have to make a decision on one and then proceed. If there's information that you wanted to share with the group,
Like what I just said, but in a more formal,
if there was something, yes, more specific, you might want to share it.
no,
Before.
nothing more specific.
All those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, the motion is denied. Do I have another motion?
I would move that we recommend approval of rezoning the subject property from single-family to two-family housing based on the appropriateness of size, scale, and location of the project.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Corey? Yes.
So the approval for the change in zoning can't be based on the design presented. Although I believe Dale.
Okay.
Dale can walk out of here. You change that zoning. I can show up tomorrow and say, I want to put up the cheapest duplex I want and rent it out to whoever on a month-to-month basis. So I say that because clearly we love what you do.
Understood.
Any other discussion before we take a vote on this motion on the floor? Yeah.
Would it be possible to add a condition or a finding of fact to your motion that you're considering the zoning across the road, the cemetery, the size, and where it's at? It makes a lot of sense for a transitional zoning between multifamily down to two-family, down to single-family.
Yes, as
That could be
Written
either a
out.
finding of fact or an explanation and condition. Probably more appropriate as a finding of fact for reasoning on why you're considering what you're recommending.
yes, do I have to say that then?
Put it in the minutes.
With finding of fact that adjacency to multifamily cemetery, it's across the street.
And it appears to be a good transitional zoning between the multifamily and the single-family residential.
An appropriate transitional zoning between multifamily or two-family and single-family. That was clumsy.
And then Corinne would have to accept that.
Second,
I
yeah,
accept.
you accept it?
Yes.
Okay, great, Corinne, thank you. Any other discussion before we vote on the motion on the floor? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I appear to City Council next Monday night.
I'd like to move on to new business number C. Public hearing on the sign permit request from Michael Heritage, B&G Services LLC for one new wall sign for Shopko Optical at 6,000 Monona Drive, case number S 0222019. Michael, please step up to the podium.
I'm glad you listened to them up.
I'm not sure. They're all
Hi, I'm Michael Sertage, and I'm here on a proposed change to a sign ordinance for the particular property at 6,000 Monona. Basically, the property had a sign development plan that was part of the approval originally. My customer, Shopko Optics, is looking to build out one of the units there and wants to place one of their signs on the front of the building. So in your packet, it shows what the sign would look like, the size and shape along the color. And I guess the color is the sticking point here, because the sign meets the requirements for size for the building, but Shopko, when they developed their signage, they wanted to make it standard throughout the entire state. And so the teal blue with the white letters is pretty much their standard signage. We request a variance to this, to the color ordinance placed upon the property here. The Subway next door came in about 10 years ago and requested the same type of change, and it was granted to them. So we would be right next door to the Subway.
Thank you. Seeing no one else is here for the public hearing, we'll close the public hearing section and move on to consideration of action. So you can stay at the podium if you would. Item number 60, consideration of action on the sign permit request by Michael Cherdish, B&G Services LLC for one new wall sign at Shopko Optical at 6,000 Monona Drive, case number S002-2019. Questions for Michael related to the sign request? I'm sorry. go to the staff.
Yeah, I have nothing further to add. That Douglas laid out the kind of the analysis, just what Michael reviewed on this, so nothing further to add unless there's questions for staff.
Great. Questions? Yes.
These are new words to me. So is the sign, are the letters raised off of the teal background, or is it one panel with the letters on it?
It's one panel with the letters on it, but it's a blue background where right now the development for this particular project had a sign ordinance that required everybody to have a standard color.
Right, yeah.
And so that they, about 10 years ago, the Planning Commission had allowed Subway to come in and use their corporate colors for the sign in their location. And so that's all we're asking is the ability to use the corporate colors that Shopko Optical has. These same colors are being placed in other parts of the state. For example, Madison is going to have the same color sign. We've got one in Watertown, same colors. West Bend, same colors, and also in the Appleton and northern part of the state. It's all the same colors to maintain a corporate image. So, and that's all we're asking is the ability to go with the teal blue color and white letters instead of what the planned development sign approval was originally.
Okay. Chris?
This is just going to be a night for me, I guess. Could I have the document reader, please? Thank you. It's getting hard to see. So this is, if you didn't get a chance to go by, this is the building. It's a really good-looking building, good architecture, and when they came in for the sign package for the building, both the commission and the applicant were very concerned about matching the architecture, matching the building, making a good cohesive looking project. The only one that varies right now, as you can see, is the Subway. And that consideration was given. They are allowed, anybody's allowed a logo on there up to 2 by 2, I believe, 4 square feet. And that's a little bigger than a logo. It's probably 2 by 5, 2 by 6, something like that. So that's exceptionally allowed, was just to take these channel letters and do them in the yellow instead of the white. Karine, your question as far as the, I believe, not to speak for you, but I don't think you gave her an answer. It's channel lit letters, correct?
Correct.
So it is channel lit letters as in this sign right here, which they have, but they're asking to put a blue background behind it.
Yes, that's what I was wondering.
So if you look at what's there, then you have to imagine.
It's not a
I've got
cat.
a small one, but I
Yes.
can't.
That's
It's all
okay.
really-
You have to imagine this
Okay.
on the building along with all of this. And that's where I have an issue, and that's why we went through the signage plan. It's kind of combining the two kinds of signs. He wanted to have this diabond board for different look. He wanted variants, which we all agreed. This thing is built to look like, you know, old school, where it's a bunch of buildings put together and then they're coexisting, but they have some consistencies and some differences. So with this diabond, he wanted to have this type of sign on there. It's actually painted on the board, but it's very specific. The board had to be black, it had to blend in, it had to be architecturally compatible. I would argue that, as much as I understand it's their color, this would be shocking, and it would certainly get Shopko Optical what they want, which is to be noticed. But I think it would be at the expense of all other people that spent the money on their signs to follow the sign code and keep a comprehensive architecture on the building. And the other comment I would make is, by going over the size between here and here, you can see how big this got and how it's even stretched into the space. I mean, it's completely filling the space up, and that, I think, because those letters are too big. And if you look at the rest of the occupants, you don't see that. You see everyone having a little room between their sign and their space. This one fills that space to the brim. So I think my opinion is the letters are too big by asking for the variance to the size. It fills it right up. And I think that band of blue behind it is, it's not a logo. Logos, we allow 2 by 2, and we made the subway a little bigger, but, I mean, that's massive. And if anybody was of the opinion to allow it, then for me that, I mean, I would be against it, but if you wanted to allow it, then that would have to be down to the 2 feet, because that's part of the, clearly part of the signage to put that color on there. That it's not a neutral background or anything like the rest of the signs we allowed there. All the other ones put the channel lit letters on a raceway that was required to be painted to match the bricks behind it, so what you see is the sign, the letters.
Excuse me.
Yes.
The only comment that I would have here is that the actual sign space that we're showing the sign is the same size of sign was up there before, because the holes and stuff that were placed into the brick for mounting the sign are still there. The electrical is still there, and so the actual distance of the sign from column to column is covering the same amount of distance that the old sign had covered.
I believe that was the covered board though, correct? It was the board, it wasn't an individual channel, but it was that diamond or whatever.
And I'm not familiar with what was the actual sign that was
I
there.
believe it was because he went every other, he had that and the diamond, the nose, and the diamond, and he went back and forth. And if you see when you put these boards up, there's room then where the sign is as big as that board.
Mhm.
And that's what gets the letters, for me, down to proportion with all the other letters on the building.
And also, I just want to state that color-wise, if you take a look at all of the other letters, Subway jumps out at you as well on that particular photograph, because the color is different than what is allowed. And by allowing some variance in there, because some of these other spaces at some point will change over and you'll end up with some additional different signage, it will give it more of a flavor that you don't have just the black and the white letters that you see right there, which maybe at one point in time was appealing, but like everything else, tastes and vision and that change.
Okay, if I could argue, Subway jumps out at you because they have a much more readable font. Clearly, the white's more readable than even the yellow. If you look at the other end, anytime that jumps out at you too, because it's a much more readable font. But you know, I think somewhat just depends on what you pick for signage in your fonts.
Rob?
I don't disagree with some of the comments, but I feel like there's several examples where we've amended comprehensive sign packages to allow exactly this. So the first one comes to mind is the Air Force over by Great Clips. There was an H&M Block, I think, over by Shopko on one of those little strip malls. Granted, in my opinion, this building has a little more aesthetic architecture,
Right.
but precedent.
I don't believe any of those actually allowed just a big splash of color back there. In fact, when we talked about our sign code, we said the one thing we don't want is it looks like somebody put a piece of plywood up there and just painted it to attract attention.
Maybe not, yeah.
I don't believe any of those allowed something like that.
But this, again, this isn't painting a board and, I mean, it's not a painted sign, it's still the same type of
Right,
lettering.
it's still the
It's just
same.
different, right.
Same
right.
type.
Yeah. Cory?
So, again, sorry if this is a dumb question, but if I look at the sign package for the Water Tower Plaza, it says that the Diabond signs do have color, oh, I see, never mind, got it. It's related to the logo, color is limited to the trademark, and it has to be the 2x2, got it, okay.
Susan?
I think, the building across the street has a lot of different types of logos in different colors, so it's true they don't have the Diamond backing, but they do have different colors. And I've heard a lot of comments, myself included, about what was on Lake Edge, and I know that's Madison, But with their signage, which I think it's very effective what they did, and every shop has different backing, and it does make it, so to your comment about this being supposed to look like different buildings, to me, this lends itself, and I took a picture of it today too, because I was sitting there looking at it when I went by twice, actually, and sat there and looked at it to see, because they have you can't really see it there, but there's a temporary sign up now that has that color in it, and it's on my camera, anyway.
Right, yep.
So I was, because when I first looked at this, I thought, well, that might be jarring, and then I went by, as I said, and looked at it, and I guess, to me, the size is pretty similar. I mean, it covers 2 sections of that building, and if you look at the tasting room, that goes over like 3 sections. Anytime Fitness goes over, so it looks to me like the signs are simple. I think the sign size seems appropriate to me, and the letter P is the only one I think that the P drop, the bottom part of the P drops down a little bit, makes it a bigger letter. Was that the one that's out blue size? It's always sort of one letter was always.
Yep.
Anyway, I thought it looked okay, and I thought it was to the point that we might have to reconsider some of that as new things come in. I've always had a little bit of trouble understanding how we regulate corporate sign. I don't know how else you could do this. I mean, I thought, well, maybe, we could have you do just the the letters on the, whatever you call that, bar behind it. Have them be a different, the teal color, but that would look more different, I think, than this does. I mean, this keeps the white lettering. It just does change that background color.
And the sign itself meets the size requirement for the building.
Right.
If we would have come in with the black letters on white, the way it was originally set up, it's my understanding that we wouldn't even have to be here. We would have been approved already.
Right.
It's
the
because
color.
of the blue color or the teal color that brings us here tonight. And that's the request for the variance.
Right. Brian?
So this question has come up before when we have buildings that, when they were built, they came together with the sign package for the entire building, and we know over the course of sign debate here, that has been one of the great debates of when there's a property with multiple tenants and there was a sign package approved at one point. Even when we have in writing from the owner of the building of like, oh yeah, I approve that. Well, that's the whole purpose of, as that building owner, coming back and saying, you know what? I want to get rid of that sign package, and I want to allow individual signs to be considered that fit within these parameters. The original agreement that got worked out set the parameters for us to help enforce. Unfortunately, like an owner saying, yeah, I agree to that, like it ties our hands of, okay, well, if let's say they agree to this one, then tomorrow someone else comes in to rent out a different property, and they want to do almost the same thing, but instead of teal, they want to put up green. And the owner says, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't like green. Well, they have the ability to do that, but help us set the parameters and help us then enforce those parameters. And I think what's distinctively different, because like my next thought, if I were in your shoes, would be, well, tell me about Subway. Subway and the trademark issue, if you look up Subway, that's what you're going to find anywhere. Not only in Madison, not only in Wisconsin, not only in the US, but beyond. When we look up Shopko Optical, we'll likely find some images regarding that, but not to the same level of trademark and logo.
Well, because it's just not as big as a corporation.
Exactly.
But that was some of the reasoning behind Subway. That was the reasoning behind the Air Force building and the sign, which actually we held true to regarding State Farm down at Fritz's property, where the sign package was blue and white, and they were like, but we're State Farm and it's red.
So it's a big corporate America, then we have to approve it because it's big corporate
State
America.
Farm
but if
is
it's a
corporate.
small business,
State
then
Farm
we
is
don't.
corporate America, and we denied that same one because it was a sign package. We said, no, the building it says blue and white. If you want to change that, have the property owner come in and say, I don't want to set these same requirements. Like, I want to open it up. I don't want it to be set to certain colors. Like, that's the right of that property owner to set those parameters. And being able on individual applicants to say, yeah, I want something different this time, or I want something different that time, that puts them as a future tenant through the ringer, which I don't think you should be. I don't think it should be you here
Do you know
asking
if
for that.
Shopko Optical spoke at all about the signage to the building owner prior to coming
Well,
to?
yeah, as far as I'm aware, the building owner has seen the signage and had no problem with it. He only wanted the old poles that were created for the old signs, that if they weren't used, to be sealed up with silicone. That was his biggest.
The integrity of the building.
Yeah, we have
Yep.
the
Right.
emails attached.
Right. So, okay. Any other questions, comments?
I don't have
Yes.
a question, I have a comment. If you do decide to approve this sign, I won't, because I don't think it's appropriate. I think it ruins the architecture of the building. But I would think you should at least include the entire back panel, because that's clearly part of the signage. It's not a backdrop, it's not something that's blending in, it is part of that sign. And now you have a 3-foot high sign instead of 2 foot, which every other sign on that building is 2 foot high.
Mhm.
This is clearly exceeding that if you consider what's been submitted. I would prefer that they come back with, or we approve it with individually illuminated letters. They could be in the teal if we want to approve teal, but at least it would match the consistency, the height, and the look of the rest of the building.
And that, I guess I'd be interested in what your thought is on that and what other commissioners' thoughts are on the teal letters. Because that was my first thought too, was, well, couldn't they just do the letters and make them teal? But then I thought, well, that also is a departure, because this specifies white letters, and it's also a departure from the look. So I
Right,
don't know.
here again, they're looking to do this throughout the entire state
Right.
with the exact same signage to add, to the branding of the business. It's not one individual company or owner who's coming in and gonna set up an optical shop here. We're talking of multi locations throughout the entire state that this is gonna be, and it's those colors were the colors that were chosen, obviously, when they developed the name and the look.
Do I have a motion? This is a call to action, folks. I need a motion.
I have a question.
Yes, Rob?
So you're saying that, you're saying the sign is 3 foot high? So-
Yes, I consider for this, what
Yeah,
they're proposing,
I understand
consider
that.
the sign, because it's clearly all part of the, in fact, he's admitted
In the
that.
sign criteria, so is that outside of the sign criteria that's set, because it said panels are to be 3 foot high lettering, not
That's
just?
when they're the panels that blend into the architecture. This is part of the gravity sign that you're reading with that, to me, to my eye, that jumps out. This is the individually lit letters that are supposed to be on a raceway that's painted to match the brick, except then they're putting on a sign behind it, they're painting really bright, because that's their logo or their look, to make it really stand out. But to make it really stand out, to me, then that's the whole, to my eye, that's the sign.
I would agree with that. That's one sign.
Yeah, and it's 3 foot high.
It's like painting the building to.
Yes.
Well, the extra teal in that, we could almost classify that as part of, the extra, whatever, 6 inches of additional teal for the backdrop there as part of the logo of Shopko Optical.
Right, right.
Right, and that's not allowed to be 3
Right.
foot
Yeah,
high.
so.
Well, it's,
Then it should-
because the letters take up 2'6" of that space.
The logo is 24-inch max.
Right, but
Height. So,
I'm just saying that that additional color that you're seeing back there is part of their their image. And we're talking the space, the 6-inch space from the letters to the top of the sign.
Understood. I agree with Chris on the fact
Yeah,
that
that
that's a 3-foot tall sign. Like as presented to me, that reads as a
Yeah.
3-foot by 17-foot sign.
But as Susan just pointed out,
The
It says-
comprehensive sign code says that the height of all the drive-on panels shall be 3
3
feet
feet.
with signage area maximum of 2 feet. So this fits that.
But,
It's
okay,
the color is the
The
only
color, the
difference.
color is the difference.
yeah, that's what makes it into a taller sign for me, for my
I see.
eye,
Visually
that is the
looks-
sign.
okay,
But
got it.
when you look at the diagram, if you could have the overhead again, please. If we could have the, I called the wrong thing, the document reader, it'll work this time. That doesn't jump out at you. When you look at that, what jumps out at you is the sign.
Right,
Either the lettering or the sign itself. You don't see that.
right,
When you change it to this, then that looks like the entire sign.
right. I see what you're saying.
What if it was 2 feet total?
That would be a lot better.
So it would just shrink the font, it would shrink
Mhm.
everything. How would those letter sizes compare to the other letters?
They'd be probably a little bit smaller.
Right, we would be smaller than all the rest of them through there, because they're white.
It wouldn't be small in all of them, it'd probably be more like
Mhm.
right there, the nails.
Would that be more,
But I mean, you can see
Yeah.
Anytime Fitness,
Would be.
the size of their letters.
I will also add this. When I took this picture today, you can see I was over in Studio Z's parking lot. It's hard to see in the picture, but I could read that really well. It was very clear, and I kind of have Magoo eyes, and I could still read it.
do I have a motion?
No, a point to clarify, when Anytime Fitness went in there, I believe they also had a coloring recommendation for purple.
Yeah.
Similar reason that was denied had to do with it didn't fit the sign package
Or the building architecture.
or the building
I mean,
architecture.
that's what we're really trying to preserve.
And like for property rights, if this property owner wants to come here and present a wider range of things to ask for, like then we would need to consider what all of those pieces are that would bring in the original CDD aspect, which why the sign package was also part of that.
Okay, so I guess I would go back to our previous conversation that Corrine brought up around the housing, which is to say, if you're suggesting that the owner of the building come back to present, is that not just delaying this because it's the owner? Because if in fact this is a corporate,
Anytime Fitness was a
sign.
corporate sign.
I know, but the building owners already said in writing that they're supportive of this corporate combination. They've already said, this is okay with me, it's my building, in their email, effectively. So to have them come back effectively to say the same thing, what's the purpose?
Because you're not
Take-
gonna change
we don't
the
have to-
other signs on the building. I mean, the owner would come, if the owner came in, it would just be to argue or discuss our particular location, and then he didn't want the sign package, but the other businesses wouldn't change their signs.
We wouldn't have to have all these signs come back to Plan Commission if we do that. Because then the comprehensive sign package is amended so that now this becomes in staff, or like a staff approval. Versus every time when Melios wants to lease a space and they want to use red letters, they don't have to come here. They just fill out a sign permit application, I believe, like we've done with other
so if
comprehensive.
tasting room is moving,
Right.
we're going to have another one then coming in for that unless this is amended?
If they don't meet the current comprehensive sign package.
The other piece of having the building owner relook at what they want to have as a comprehensive sign package, because this was a CDD and there, I believe we had some city interest in the development, if I remember correct.
Was this in the TID?
I think it was, because wasn't this eminent domain for the switch of the pizza oven? So we had some original input in architecture, design, and sign package. So if I was this building owner and I wanted to open up and say, you know what, I don't want just white letters on black background, in these configurations, I want to consider a variety of lettering in these areas. Like, I don't care what the color of the lettering is, but I want them all to be on channel or on the Diabond, but if the Diabond, I want it to be black. Like, we can set, they can ask for what that to be set. So that way staff approval can take place anytime there's an applicant that comes forward, as long as it fits within that sign package. So the idea of individuals, the reason why I don't think, like, I apologize to the applicant for having to go through this, and at the same time, that's part of our role as this commission is, like, we were given and 10 years ago discussed what the sign package would be for this building for a variety of reasons. And to have individual email chains to determine something's going to be changed or not, like, that's not the way you do things for the long run. Like, I understand the applicant's desire to move forward, and I understand, well, if we're going to get to the same outcome, why don't we do it? For me, the ends don't justify the means. I'd rather have us put together a better sign package that allows something that fits better parameters and allows more individuality amongst those rental units.
Chris?
Sorry. So, as far as the owner, to Brian's point, and he did approve Anytime Fitness, and we went up and said, well, no, that doesn't work for this building. It really affects the overall look of the building, and ended up having it go that way. So I think just because the owner says, yeah, sign the lease, you can have whatever you want, I'll give it to you. I think in some respects, the owner was here, and the owner was adamant about the sign package, and the owner probably realizes that we aren't just going to stamp any sign that comes in. So to their benefit, they can say, yeah, I'll approve that. I'm not saying that's what happened here, but it is certainly a possibility. We always have the option to approve a modified version of this. If there's something that people feel comfortable with, say, and that the applicant would be okay with, you could run out here tonight with approval that says, for example, there'll be the individually lit letters on a channel, and you can make them white, you can make them the teal, whatever, without the teal background. Or some people may think that it would be better if we just shrink it down so the sign itself is only 2 foot tall. There are options tonight. We don't have to say the owner needs to come back before he can approve anything.
We can, I'm sorry.
Right.
That's kind of what I was thinking. I mean, I think we
Right.
should come up with some recommendations. So
Right.
But could we maybe, right, if other commissioners felt that reducing the backing to 2 feet or something, and making the letters more the size of whatever they are, because I think you're right, in the nail salon, they seem to be smaller, 2.5 feet, whole sign. If just reducing the size of the background and keeping it teal with white letters, would that be equally acceptable to other planning commissioners as having the channel letters be teal instead? I mean, should we give them options and have them go back to staff, or that, and we've done that sometimes?
Would you like to make that a motion?
Well, I don't know what that, is that reasonable? I mean, in terms of Shopko as a corporate,
Here
design.
again, they're trying to maintain
They're trying to maintain,
their
I would guess,
consistency.
I would guess their vote would be to keep the teal background and the white lettering.
Right,
It's
right,
smaller.
absolutely. Right.
So if that makes people feel better about it.
Or
I'd
what
be
about
willing to.
making it like the tasting room
Well,
that
tasting-
doesn't have the channel letters? What is that called? Diabond?
Yeah.
Would that be a 2-foot diabond with white letters as opposed to channel letters
Well, we
on a
should-
teal background?
Rob?
I feel like we're trying to design a sign
Right.
for approval, and the owner has not approved what we're designing.
Right, well, right.
I feel like this is a futile exercise to
Well,
think that,
Generally speaking, the plan commission should stay away from trying to recraft an application that's before you. It's better
Right.
to just render
Right.
an opinion one way or the
Give
other. on
reasons,
something.
But not
Right.
give reasons, and then they could come back with a different proposal.
Right. Chris?
I would disagree a little bit with that statement. If I'm an applicant, I'd rather come out of here with something in my hand than nothing. And I can always come back as an applicant. I always have the right to come back. And if we come here and we determine, if in our opinion, this is all signed, and we say it's okay, but you have to shrink that overall height of the background to 2 feet, that would be an appropriate approval. If the commission feels they're okay with that color there.
if it's size related, I would be more comfortable versus giving
Right.
all the other recommendations.
Of course, then the letters themselves become that much smaller
Correct.
compared to everybody else on there, and we're back to, having a much smaller presence than anyone else on the entire property. And then we still have the same thing with Subway's got different colors on theirs.
Right.
Then that's to Brian's point that maybe the owner needs to come back.
Well,
Do I have a motion?
Move approval with the overall height of the background no more than 2 feet, and the individual letters shrunk appropriately to have the same proportions on the proposed sign.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Susan. Any other discussion? Brian?
My vote won't be representative of the sign, it'll be representative of what I've spoke to. I agree it's a tasteful sign, I think it would look good on the building. In general, if the other signs were individually allowed to sway from the original proposal, as we've talked about on other strip mall centers, unfortunately, like, I feel like the individual email approvals is just not appropriate for us to be engaged in.
Well, could we also, as a separate, not a motion necessarily, but ask the owner to come in with a new package, knowing that that this is gonna be coming up again? I mean, there'll be a new business going in there. I mean, separate from this decision.
The problem you would have, the problem you'd have with that is, he doesn't know what business or entity is
Right.
going to be coming in, what kind of colors or anything of that nature. If we're going now, if the commission here approves the color differences, you may end up having a State Farm sign next door, type of deal. So we would just ask to keep the same size and just a variance on that color. Because if the color was black, it would be fine. But since the teal blue is their corporate color, that's the reason I asked for the variance. No different than Subway, even though they're not anywhere near the size of Subway.
Chris?
If I might, 2 comments. I'm just trying to extend this, of course, because I've got nowhere to go. To Brian's comments, I agree. But when we did this sign package, it was really, everybody had to be the same color and everything, and we have encouraged different colors. And if you want to have a few different colors, it might add interest to a building. This wouldn't be my preferred way to do it, but at 2 feet, to my eye, it fits with the rest of the signs. So I'm not arguing the 2 or 3 feet. I think what we've given the applicant, we've given them their sign, but they just can't be quite so big. And that shrinks it down, and it's allowing an introduction of some more color, so if somebody else wants to, but it's not giving them this sign that overpowers everybody else on the building, and it's not quite having that big thing on all that nice brick. So to me, it fits the intent of the sign code. As far as that, we've argued at our point to where there's no more arguments to be had. My opinion is to shrink it down.
Rob?
This is my final comment. I would agree with what Chris had said. I would vote for approval of that as you presented it. And if the owner of the building is not happy, or your client's not happy, I would encourage them to explore options to avoid this in the future.
My last comment, I of course want to incorporate staff's recommendation for the electrical permit. The recommended condition approval.
You have a motion on the floor? We're
Well,
going to
I
take a vote?
Well, and I
Susan?
was just gonna say, they do have the option of, I mean, it's hard to sit here and, for me, to picture what 2 feet looks like and then what the letters are gonna look like. I'm assuming the letters will be similar in size to the nail salon, but if it needs to be 2.5 feet
Yeah,
or
can I
slightly
ask-
less, I mean, they could come back with that. With this being approved, they could come back and we could discuss it again. If they're really unhappy with this, this at least gives them some.
Can we at least ask, instead of the 2 foot and the 3 foot that we have there, can we split the difference? 2.5 foot?
Not if we're following our sign.
We have a
Code.
motion on the floor. So if
Yeah.
we want to split the distance, difference, we need to vote this down and we propose something else. Okay, so let's take a vote on the motion on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Nay. I have one. Okay. So the motion carries.
So it was a 2-foot sign of the teal
Yeah.
within the parameters proportional.
Okay.
And if they're really unhappy, they would have to come back.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you being here.
No problem, thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
do have a question, if I've got to discuss this all with Shopko and see where we're gonna go. If we want to come back and ask for the 2'6", that would be then at the next planning commission meeting?
No.
It'd have to be submitted by today.
Yeah.
So
No,
it'd
it would be,
August.
yeah, it would be several,
It'd be August.
at least a couple of meetings away.
Okay,
Well, at least,
August, the beginning of August.
yeah.
Yeah, likely it'd be August 12th would be the first available.
Right.
okay,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you. Let's move to number 7, reports of staff and commission members, staff report regarding status.
Yeah, the only thing I've got from City Planner Plowman is there is a application that's at Landmarks Commission on Tanyawatha. I don't have the street address, apologize for that. That's got a 3 Seasons porch addition that's being considered. As you recall, with the change in the historic preservation ordinance, this is kind of the last one before we switch over to our new ordinance. So Landmarks will be reviewing it this week to provide a recommendation that will then come forward to you. For future applications, it'll just be Landmarks Commission that'll be involved in that review. So that will likely be on the docket for our July 22nd meeting. And there may also be a different sign permit application not related to what was discussed tonight. That might also be on the docket for the 22nd as well.
Okay.
I will be absent.
I will be absent as well, but Kathy and I have already discussed the fact that she's gone now and
She'll be
we've
back.
gone. Yeah,
It's back to the-
yeah, exactly. We arranged our vacations appropriately. Okay, any requests for information regarding other projects from the commission?
I have a request for city staff to pass along to future applicants regarding sign packages. That when they come forward, to encourage them, if they're in a building that has a sign package that already exists and it's outside of that sign package, to encourage them to come forward with a change in the sign package of what that would look like versus individual tenants showing up. Very often, we don't have the owner of the building here, and it's disappointing.
I guess, I appreciate the thought behind that, but I'm wondering how useful that is in the sense that if they just come back saying they want to allow more flexibility, I mean, because when you get corporate logos coming in and corporate letterings and all that kind of thing, it's gonna be different, and they can't really project what that will be. So it's almost like you're asking them to come back and just get rid of their sign package. It seems to me, maybe that's not true.
It might be that, but it might be setting different parameters on what the sign package might include. So it could be the coloring within the lettering can be approved at city staff level as long as it's within the kind of logo aspect for it. So I think there are ways that building owners can renegotiate an expectation that they put in place for us to uphold, and for us to make individual decisions on something that they put in place. The onus is on them to change that, not for us to do that.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move adjournment.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I wish we did